Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you can hear me. This is Mehmet Ayvaci. I am from UT Dallas. My co-authors in this paper are Yağmur Özdemir. She used to be one of our PhD students at UTD. She's now at Rotterdam School of Management. And Alejandra Zentner from economics at UTD. This research was inspired by a medical paper published recently, late last year. The context was large language models applied to in healthcare. Okay, so let me try to motivate it in a way, quickly. Healthcare is unique in its usage of AI and has experienced decades of lack of usage, which is dubbed as AI winter. There are many reasons for it. Heavy regulation, unstructured data, lack of skills, very complex ecosystem are some of the reasons. But one particular reason that there was hesitancy in using AI was the older AI systems, traditional AI systems, lacked contextual understanding. Another reason is the historical AI systems aim to augment physicians, and lack of process innovations. For those who are familiar with IS theories would agree with this. Process innovation is an important component of having a meaningful use of these systems. And this was a hindrance. Recently, this changed a bit. And there's some more optimism and increased interest in AI for substituting work tasks. I'm not talking about substituting for physicians. I'm talking about substituting work tasks. And this connects with the fact that some of the barriers, such as lack of contextual understanding, is now partially addressed. Large language models can overcome barriers, and I would, for those who are interested in Dr. Wachter and Erik Brynjolfsson had a paper recently published in JAMA explaining, why Gen AI or large language models can overcome some of the unique barriers that healthcare is exposed to. Okay, now with this interest, there's a lot of applications in healthcare trying to use large language models for a variety of tasks, especially in the administrative side. But we are interested in this research, another trend that's looking at using large language models to substitute a doctor's task, triage, diagnosis, treatment, and in particular, doctors are inundated with lots of questions in their EHR inboxes, and using large language models to answer patient questions is an effort that many organizations are trying to pilot or try, especially the leading ones. And you may have heard or read in New York Times, in Washington Post, and other places about some of these use cases becoming increasingly prevalent, right? So this is becoming a reality in healthcare. Now, fast forward this usage, what we are asking is trying to draw attention to, so what could happen if this trend holds? And asking the question of what do patients think or perceive when you compare responses given by AI systems versus doctors. Now, it's very natural to also extend it to how the perception compares with a panel of experts, actual doctors, and whether there are any differences. And we are also interested in understanding whether there are some behavioral factors that impact people's perceptions. Okay? Now, yes, I'm going to go through the details, but I would like to give a quick glimpse of what we do and what we find. To address these research questions, we designed a survey experiment in Prolific platform to assess non-experts' perception of ChatGPT. And we identified two behavioral factors in relation to our setup. One is length. When people are non-experts in a topic, they typically rely on peripheral cues that are measurable. And in our context, the length of the prose that the responders give human or ChatGPT as a potential cue that a evaluator can rely on. And the second is, many of those who are doing AI research would be familiar with, is the source of the responder, right? We are talking about algorithmic aversion and people's confidence in machines and how they impact this perception, okay? So that's how we design our study. So what do we find? What are the key takeaways? People overwhelmingly prefer ChatGPT responses over clinicians, even when those responses provided by ChatGPT are of lower quality. The length matters. The longer the prose provided by ChatGPT, non-experts' preference of machines increase. And we also identify algorithmic aversion, and disclosing the response source, that it was a machine actually providing the response, diminishes this preference, especially when the ChatGPT response quality is lower. Okay, so that's a summary of what we find. Okay, now going back to the inspiration to our study, this JAMA Internal Medicine paper published in 2023 by Ayvaci et al. It's a seminal paper. I recommend, it's a nice paper. What they have done is they have extracted these 195 questions from a subreddit, a Reddit platform, in which patients ask questions, real patients, whoever is suffering from a disease, you can go and become a part of this community, ask a question, and real validated doctors who are validated by the moderators would answer these questions, okay? And they have taken these, they generated ChatGPT responses, and they form a panel of experts to evaluate these responses. And what they have found is, actually, these experts found ChatGPT to be more empathetic. Okay, that's one of the findings in the study. We are basing our study on this, and a simple task, one of the tasks that we are focusing on is asking the participants in the Prolific platform to evaluate two responses, right? One provided by the human and one provided by ChatGPT, and which we are asking, which response do you think is better? We have, alternative questions, other questions that I'm going to come back, but this is the main task that people are doing. Okay, what is our design? I would like to clarify one construct that is important for our experiment, which is the group assignment. In the JAMA study, they have identified they have 3 experts, right? And these experts may prefer machines versus humans, or the other way around. So the number of experts that prefers ChatGPT over physician is measured by the group assignment. 0 is none of the experts prefer ChatGPT. They consider this as low quality. 3 is all the physicians are actually preferring ChatGPT. Any subject that is coming to and filling our survey is going to be randomly assigned to one of these groups, right? Group of questions out of those 195. And in the first arm, they are going to evaluate these responses, human versus machines. In the second arm, we matched the ChatGPT response length to the human response length. And this effectively meant that almost 99% of the time, the response was shorter, right? So it's a length treatment, but we are actually shortening it to match to the human. And each subject is then randomized in the third arm, randomized into a control or treatment. Control group is, again, another set of question and response pairs. And the treatment is that you reveal, okay, this was a physician response, and the other one was generated by ChatGPT. Okay. So I'm not going to go through the regressions, but I'm going to share the results visually. So let's try to understand this graph. On the vertical axis is the score of ChatGPT responses. The higher, the more ChatGPT is more preferred. 5 is the neutral point, right? This dashed line is the neutral point. If you're above this point, it means that ChatGPT is preferred, and if you're below, that means that you prefer the human. The red lines are the non-expert, and the green are the expert. And when we compare, we see that for group 0 on the horizontal axis, meaning that experts thought of the ChatGPT response to be very low quality. In that scenario, we find that non-experts are overwhelmingly preferring ChatGPT response, while experts are not thinking of the ChatGPT response to be of high quality. And then this trend continues across all these groups. Okay? So this is the main result. The second is the shortening treatment or the length treatment. We see a consistent trend in which we are identifying the longer the prose, the more the person prefers the ChatGPT responses. And third, when we reveal the source, when we identify that it was actually a human versus a machine, for the first three groups, which are lower quality ones, you see that there's a significant difference. And when all the experts agree that the ChatGPT response is of good quality, non-experts, laypersons have a very similar perception of ChatGPT response. Okay? Now, recap. Non-experts prefer ChatGPT more than experts. Non-experts prefer longer ChatGPT responses. Revealing the responder being ChatGPT changed non-experts' evaluation. Okay, that's the summary. Now, why do people prefer ChatGPT responses? So there can be many reasons. We thought a bit about this problem, and we want to identify reasons that are acceptable to the healthcare industry. And we went to HCAHPS, Hospital Consumer Assessment of Healthcare Providers and Systems. It's a survey that the government conducts on all patients and try to measure the interactions between provider and patients. And 4 of these questions actually relate to physician-patient interactions. And they're capturing clarity, details, respectfulness, and helpfulness of these results. So we are using this survey instrument. And during the survey phase, we ask these questions. And we try to understand to what extent these different dimensions actually explain the perception that we have identified. And among those 4, what we are finding is helpfulness has a higher effect as compared with other dimensions. So people found the ChatGPT answers to be more helpful, right? That's one finding. And we want to also see when the length treatment is applied and ChatGPT responses are shortened, what happens to people's preferences. So what we are seeing is from different dimensions, not only the evaluation, the perception, but clarity, helpfulness, respectfulness, addressing details. All of these dimensions actually diminish, right? All of these dimensions diminish. But we also identify if there's a mediating effect of these dimensions. We do causal mediation analyses and see whether shortening the ChatGPT response impacts the clarity, helpfulness, respectfulness, and details, and which in turn changes the patient's perception. And we find that all these 4 dimensions fully mediates the reduction in non-experts' perception with length treatment. And we are interested also in if there's any heterogeneity in this effect. And we have tried many things. I'm going to be only presenting the positive result, which is based on the level of usage by patients. Some patients or some responders are using the healthcare less, and some are using healthcare more. And when we apply the same mediation analysis to the low usage people who are not using the healthcare system as much, we find that these people are primarily relying on the length as a cue as opposed to these other dimensions. Whereas people who are high users, who are using the healthcare system more often, they are actually relying on the clarity, helpfulness, respectfulness details in their perception, forming of their perception. So this is one of the interesting findings. We are also looking at algorithmic aversion, trying to understand the heterogeneity. And we are finding, as similar to the literature, that education is an important construct. More educated people are actually less prone to algorithmic aversion. And the fully mediation results hold. We are doing more experiments to increase the power of our statistical analyses. One other thing that we are currently doing is, one potential criticism to what we have done is, these are prolific subjects. They're not necessarily the actual patients. So what we have done is we have taken away those questions that are related to mental health and pregnancy, right? And also recruited participants from the prolific platform who are suffering from a mental health issue and who are also pregnant. And we are applying the same results. and then finding similar results. We have some interesting, but they are not stable yet. So I'm hoping that we are going to be able to update our manuscript and share the results with you. Okay, since I don't have time, I'm going to complete my presentation with a quote from Eric Brynjolfsson and Dr. Wachter's paper that there are unique aspects of both Gen AI and healthcare's current context that are likely to help address the challenges. And if they do, generative AI may deliver on its promise in healthcare within a few years, not decades. With that, I'll be happy to answer questions.
Great talk. I have a question on, not really a question, more like a comment. I think what you'll find can be related to the persuasion literature. So when we have persuasion, we have the central route and the peripheral route. When we say central route, is the core, answer. And when we say peripheral route, it may be cues. For expert, they can identify whether the core answer is correct or not. But for non-expert, maybe they can only rely on the cues, for example, the lens. So it can, I believe this theory can explain of
Sure, I think I agree. I think I'm definitely going to look into that. One thing is the length treatment is actually informed by this behavioral bias called attribute substitution. People using these peripheral cues, things that are measurable when they're forming their opinions, especially when they're not an expert on a topic. But definitely look into that literature as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Your result shows that people find it AI-generated, solutions more helpful, right?
No, which one is better? So people are evaluating two responses, and they are evaluating which one is better.
Which one is better, right? So
right, and then they're also evaluating the clarity, helpfulness, and on these different dimensions. Yes.
If I remember correctly, that it was higher on helpfulness, was higher for that AI-generated one.
Right.
What would you attribute it to? What would you attribute it to? Because AI-generated, in general, if you tell people, it has more impersonal feel to it, right?
Right.
So what would you attribute it to?
I mean, reading some of the responses and some of the questions, there are a lot of different questions. And consistent with the JAMA study, I think one thing is ChatGPT, because it can write and it can write in a very empathetic way. It forms this perception of you are explaining in more detail and it's very helpful. Sometimes at the expense of giving the wrong advice. So I think in prose, I have the sense that writing things in narrative form and in longer form allows people to, or makes people to perceive ChatGPT responses that are of higher quality. Sometimes right, sometimes wrong.
Sure. Do you think, so more of a comment, sort of a question, do you think that there would be better or more adoption in healthcare as the models improve and their F1 scores get better? Because like last summer, I looked at MedPalm, MedPalm 2, I think, and asked if I have an A1C level of 6.4, what should I do? And it said, oh, you're good. Which is the wrong answer, right?
Yeah.
So as the models are trained on, and I think for that specific case, it was not trained on the latest standards from Diabetes Association, right? So as the training gets better, as these models get trained on more healthcare patient-based data or feature-based data, right? They're only going to improve. So I just quickly checked as you were speaking GPT-4o, if I ask if I have an A1C of 6.3 or 6.4, it gives a good answer.
It gives a good answer, yeah.
But it didn't last summer.
Okay.
I checked specifically on MedPalm, but I'm assuming GPT-4 was.
Healthcare organizations are increasingly training their own models and fine-tuning them to be more responsive and maybe providing more up-to-date. So the technology is going to improve. Any technology is going to improve. So we are regardless of the technology, maybe the results are going to shift. What we want to give attention in early on is that as the technology evolves, there is a room that, there are potential unintended consequences, especially when, similar to what you said, maybe some questions, they're going to give the right answer, but especially in healthcare, if they give the wrong answer, then what we are going to do. That's still going to be a question And being aware of some of the behavioral biases, such as the ones that I have talked about, is still something that we got to be concerned about. Okay?